And you're like, well, unfortunately, love is so simple. It is two people looking at each other and being like, I could do this forever.
Oh,
right? And
yeah.
if that's what it is, it's not going to have anything to do with how much you improve height, weight,
Yeah.
income. The whole world works that way. So why wouldn't love?
Sometimes you're not the book someone should be reading, and that's okay. And if I'm not the cup of tea you should be drinking, then don't drink it. Welcome back to another episode of Digging Deep. It is so lovely to have you. Love Island has consumed my entire summer thus far, and it is taken over social media and just conversations in person, online, because of not only the dramatic entertainment side of it, but because of the representation of modern dating culture. Obviously, Love Island is a social experiment. It is a vacuum. It is taking people away from environments that they're used to and putting them in this very dystopian-like setting where they don't have access to the real world, they don't have access to their support systems, they don't have alone time, functioning on very minimal sleep and no time to self-regulate, really, without the whole world seeing that process. And it is the perfect breeding grounds for modern dating ideas and behaviors to be at the forefront, broadcasted for millions of people to dissect. And unfortunately, I will be contributing to that conversation today. No hate towards anybody. This is just my commentary. I did a whole episode about how Love Island is a mirror for modern dating last year because that season was very in my face, and that was like the first time I've seen like a dating show, or I'd been aware of a dating show having that effect on the internet and being so accurate of representing modern dating culture. But while watching the season, I couldn't help but wonder, is romance dead? And I've consumed a lot of media recently around the concept of love, as I often do, and movies like Materialists, Love Island, and just reminding me of different themes in projects of, is love truly dead? Is romance dead? Or is modern dating culture and the ideas that we've been sold just fading away and have finally ceased to serve us? And with that, it is time to dig deep. I want to start us off by looking at the history of marriage as we talk about the concept of love, because I think it's helpful to deconstruct this pinnacle of love. It is supposed to be seen as the biggest act of love, declaring your love in front of hundreds of people on this one singular event and then staying with that person for the rest of your lives. Marriage is usually seen as the end goal for a lot of people, especially people around my age now who are entering intentional, mature adult relationships. I've always had the perspective of, if I date someone, I'm gonna try to marry them to the best of my ability, or else it kind of feels a little bit like, what are we doing here? But I guess that's contributed to why I've never had a relationship as well, because I'm just not the type of person to enter into a connection that I don't see having potential success in my future. But it bears the question, is marriage just an economic proposition? Marriage has not always been built on the foundation of love. Love was not always a prerequisite to get into a marriage. In the movie Little Women, which I will literally jump on my soapbox and rant about for as long as I want, forever, never, never, I reference it all the time, there's a scene where Amy and Lori are talking about how like poets would describe love. And Amy has this more, I guess you could say, this more cynical perspective on love, because she is hyper aware of what it means for a woman. She says that love is an economic proposition, that getting into a relationship and securing a partner doesn't mean that I have to be in love with that person, but I'm doing it because of the life that it would guarantee me, the life and the stability that it would afford me. Marriage has not always been an area where love needs to be present in order for it to be successful. In the Substack, Love Is Not Enough by Museguided, she kind of debunks this idea that love is the only thing that needs to be present in a relationship, and she adds on these different factors that go into love and being successful in partnerships. She writes that in ancient Greece, eros, desire, madness, transcendence, was rarely expected inside marriage. In reference to the evolution of love during the Romantic era, she says, it was no longer enough to find a spouse. One had to find a soulmate. Commitment was no longer a duty. Now it had to be poetic, redemptive, symphonic. And I think it's very interesting to think about how, especially in my culture, the generation I've grown up in, I've always been fed these ideas that I need to find my dream partner, that I need to find my soulmate. And in being in the current state of the world, it seems like that narrative goes directly against the one that is also being pushed at the same time, which is keep your options open, always look for the next best thing, don't settle, take every single chance to go on dates, and don't tie yourself down. And it seems like there's little to no room for building and nurturing genuine romantic connections to flourish in a culture that feeds you contradicting narratives all the time. She writes that love is a feeling, but commitment is a choice. We live in a culture of no strings attached, rushing into romance but fleeing the second commitment is mentioned. Love pulses with a metaphor, a spark, a flame, a tide, a madness. It invites surrender, not logic. Commitment, by contrast, is sober, measured, and architectural. Love writes you sonnets, commitment signs the lease. And this specific one, it really stuck out to me, this specific line, because I just love the way that she wrote about the fluidity and just the metaphors of love and how inexplainable but also just inherently beautiful it is. And I found it really interesting because she writes about this idea of love and commitment as being separate, but I have always pictured a version of love that is not detached from commitment. The love that I've always assumed to be true for myself and for others, which I guess is kind of naive, but is a love that implies commitment, a love that implies attachment to a certain healthy extent, saying, I love you for who you are, and that is unwavering no matter what stage of life we go through, and me saying this and me committing to you, whether that's in marriage or just in a mutual agreement, is a forever thing. Like, I see you for who you are now and who you could become, and I love you anyway. Love is always with attachment, whether we intend for it to be or not. She says that the tyranny of infinite choices seduces and exhausts us. We are urged to keep our options open, our hearts slightly ajar, just in case something better pings. Many men are asked to be vulnerable without having been taught how, to show up without a map. And Bell Hooks writes a lot about this in all of her work, but specifically in The Will to Change and in All About Love, she writes about how there was this really interesting switch in women when they were beginning to push this feminist narrative and expecting more from men, specifically in the emotional arena, and when they would slowly start to show up in those ways of being more emotional and more vulnerable, they would then label them as gay, which implies this learned misogyny that women contain in ourselves as well. We've all been indoctrinated in this culture of lovelessness, this culture of devaluing caring and openly admitting that we care for people, openly admitting that, hey, I love you, even if you won't say it back. I love you, even if I may look embarrassing. Mind you, to say you love someone and to love with an open heart is the bravest thing anybody can do, but our culture has learned and continued to convince people to devalue that. Commitment must stop being seen as the death of romance. Done well, it's the scaffold love climbs. It's the difference between a spark and a fire that keeps you warm. And I think this was really important to point out, especially in this era where we're seeing the male loneliness epidemic and just a general cultural loneliness epidemic, because we have to come to a point where we're asking ourselves, why is that? How have we been contributing to our own suffering? Is it because we truly have just been blindly forced into this culture, or is it because we've been going along with it? Is it because we continue to perpetuate these ideas that to be vulnerable is to be weak, that to show that you care is the worst thing that you can do, and that you must flee from any sort of feeling? Like, we have got to do better. To love and commit, then, is to live in full awareness of impermanence and to stay anyway. It is to wake up to yourself and then to another again and again in all your unfinishedness. It is the discipline of continuing to find, not the thrill of being found. I'm whipping out the computer for this one because my notes need to come out. I apologize if you can see it in my glasses screen. That's just how it is. But that perfectly brings me to my next body of work that has really shaped my recent, findings, but just has reminded me of how harmful our modern dating culture is, and that is the movie Materialists. This was advertised as more of a rom-com, and that was a very intentional choice, which I think that a lot of people are missing. This is more of a rom-dramedy, as the cast is calling it, but it was strategically put in that category because if people knew that they were going to have a mirror held directly up to them and say, look at the world that we live in and how harmful it is to men and women, of course they wouldn't go see it. They wanted comedic relief. But it is a movie that we all need to see and wrestle with the cultural implications of, whether we're ready for it or not. And I posted a TikTok about just the theme of Materialists because I just was so moved by it at the end, and it was met with a lot of kickback. I did not expect people to actually see it and care, but so many people, not just on my video but in general to reviews of Materialists, have been calling it broke man propaganda, which hurts my heart so much because if you unpack it even the slightest bit, you would understand what Celine's song was trying to accomplish.
The truth is that we have already installed the value police inside of us, right? Like I'm like, well, I think that maybe it used to be that in the Victorian days, it was the minders and the parents and the aunts and uncles who were like, you must marry this person, right? But the truth is, like, I feel like the self-commodification and self-objectification has become so internalized that now it's like now we're fully speaking the language of the oppressor.
This movie takes on the typical trope of this option of John, who is someone who is a struggling artist. He is 37, still has a few roommates, and is more typically the broke man in this situation. And then there's Harry, who we see is supposedly advertised and trying to convince the audience to be the more ideal match, as he is financially set and abundant. And Lucy is the main character, the matchmaker, and she views love as this strategic game. Lucy explicitly states that she's an expert at dating, not love. And I think that they very importantly made this distinction that dating is not love. Dating is not romance. In dating, you can be strategic. She says a bunch throughout the movie that dating is like math. It is about calculating formulas and piecing seemingly paper-perfect things together to make a perfect match. Just like with matchmaking, she takes these very materialistic qualities like height, income, weight, sexual orientation, and she matches people up based on what they physically and materialistically desire. But with love, it goes beyond that. It transcends those barriers. We were taught that love is about compatibility, which fuels a materialistic mindset, being focused on a person's physical traits that can deteriorate over time. This movie really does touch on the idea of marrying for money versus marrying for value. And there's a scene in the beginning where one of Lucy's clients is getting married and she's having a breakdown before her wedding. She breaks down and tells Lucy that a big desire for why she wants to get married is that it makes her feel valuable and it makes her feel better than her sister. And this idea of wanting to feel valuable is repeated throughout the movie in a very explicit but also implicit way, in the sense that through Lucy's choices you can see how, and John and Harry's choices, you can see how they are all just desperately trying to prove their worth. And it shows a reflection of the culture that we live in that tells us that we are only valuable for what we have. And Harry's character had a very serious surgery done to him where it is for comedic relief, but I think it is very important to talk about, where he got height surgery because as a man on the dating market, height is a big deciding factor of whether or not you're going to have matches and ultimately whether or not you're going to be successful. And it highlights that not only are women affected by this negative narrative that you need to be of value in some way and have something to physically offer someone, but it also hurts men. We are all harmed by the strict, rigid constraints of modern dating culture. And so many people were mad about Lucy's choice to ultimately choose John, who is the more broke person in this situation, without acknowledging that just because Harry was rich doesn't mean that there was love there. In the movie, he literally admits that he's not looking for love. He's looking for someone who knows how to play the game. And Lucy knows just that. Her whole career is based on playing the game of love, commodifying oneself making yourself into this sellable item, offering your best qualities, and gamifying the most sacred thing that any of us can do: love. Yes, I'm in my car. I had to say this though. Another important distinction in the materialist conversation is putting yourself in John's shoes. Imagine you were someone who was going after their dreams, but that dream didn't guarantee financial stability or security, and asking someone to love you anyways. It forces us to ask ourselves, do we only value someone if they are of service to us, if they're able to provide something, specifically financial and material gain, or can we stay with them and see past those things? Can we value them for more than just the money in their bank account or the lifestyle that they can potentially give us? And I'm not saying that there's a right or wrong answer. It really is just about values, but I think it's important to ask ourselves why we value those things and investigate the why behind it instead of just the what of what we value. And I saw a TikTok of someone saying, and it was a woman saying that she was John, and she had a partner who was very loving and affirming and who stood by her through her struggling artist phase.
I was the John in my relationship, and by that I mean I was broke and professionally insecure when I first met my boyfriend. Feeling financially and professionally insecure is a really difficult place to find yourself in, and from personal experience, it makes you a pretty frazzled, stressed out, angry person. And by a lot of y'all's logic, when talking about this movie, my partner really shouldn't have stayed with me because I wasn't successful and I didn't really have any money. And I was pretty pissed about that and not my best self. I only felt the drive to keep pushing even when I was disappointed and lost over and over again because I had a partner that said, I love you. Not because I had a boyfriend and it was the only North Star, but because the feeling of someone loving you anyway can be very helpful.
Love is about staying. It's about seeing past someone's material assets and seeing the person. Like Sophie says, I'm not merchandise, I'm a person. Lucy says that dating takes a lot of effort, a lot of trial and error, a ton of risk and pain. Love is easy. Love is what happens when we're not thinking. Love happens to us whether we want it to or not. She says that marriage is a business deal, but love must be on the table. If love is there, there will be no math. There will be no need to strategically calculate your moves on the chessboard. There will be no need to weigh up someone's physical qualities, how much they make a year, how tall they are, what their job is. That won't matter because those things can all change in a snap of a finger. But love is unwavering. Love is what holds you up during those hard times. It's interesting because in this movie they touch on the seriously dangerous aspects of modern dating, which is risking yourself for the potential of a match. And one of the characters has a situation where she is victim to sexual assault, and I think that was, although surprising and unexpected in the movie, I think it was necessary to show the lengths that people are willing to go in order to find love. And again, that is reflective of the pressure to find someone out of fear of dying alone. And one of the most important lines of the movie that Celine Song references a lot in her interviews about it is when the character Sophie, who was the one that had the sexual assault happen to, says to Lucy, I'm not merchandise, I'm a person. Instead of viewing love and the person that you potentially want to get with as this sellable item, this thing to buy and get something out of, instead think of what you can give to the table. Love, unlike physical connections or materialist possessions, is the only situation where you must give in order to get. You must be vulnerable. You must show your heart and lay your cards out on the table and see what happens. Celine Song also mentions in some of her interviews how dating has now turned into this acquisition of an asset. If you date a high value person in society, that is going to inevitably increase your value in our current dating market. And it's very interesting to be aware of that around me, just seeing how people get together and seeing if it makes sense because they actually love each other or because they're trying to build this ideal life on the outside. And she writes that in our culture, it is almost embarrassing to outwardly say that you want love because you could be subject to judgment, to scrutiny. You could be met with people making fun of you and saying that, why do you value that? It's almost easier to ask for material things. And with wearing your heart out on her sleeve, I have to mention Miss Amaya Papaya, Love Island's winner of this season, as she absolutely should have. She represents and has resonated with so many women a specific trope of someone who shows their heart on their sleeve, someone who refuses to be watered down after countless interactions of being misunderstood and being shamed for being an openly caring person, but yet she still shines. And that is exactly why she was able to win and was able to find her connection. But I think she has stuck out for so many people because so many people are Amaya. So many women specifically do openly care and then are immediately shot down and are told that they're too much, told that they are love bombing. And I think that word was very carelessly thrown around this season because the examples of love bombing, to me personally, were merely just attempts of someone showing that they cared. And it bears the question, is it love bombing, or have we simply just lost our ability and capacity to love with open hearts, to care without criticism? So many people have retreated from dating because of the lack of vulnerability tolerance in our modern culture, and also the shame surrounding actively pursuing genuine connections. There have also been quite a few just like journal articles that have come out during the time of this season of Love Island that have built on this idea and critique of modern dating culture. In the article, Men, Where Have You Gone? Please Come Back, on the Modern Love section by the New York Times, it talks about this cultural, specifically with men, attitude of retreating from dating and how there was this instant shift from jumping into connections and then immediately running the second that vulnerability was required. I came to understand, in exact terms, what cues tempt the average 18 to 30-year-old cis heterosexual man, what drew him in, what kept him coming back. It wasn't intimacy, it wasn't mutuality, it was access to simulation, clean, fast, and frictionless. The way many men had quietly withdrawn from intimacy and vulnerability, not with violence or resistance, but with indifference. And I probably don't have to explain this to any woman that is present in the modern dating culture or just exists right now, but it seems almost impossible to find someone, specifically speaking to women who are desiring dating men, to find someone who is willing to be vulnerable and open and communicative and who won't run away the second there's a miscommunication or misunderstanding. Men who openly wear their hearts on their sleeves regardless of what society has to say. She writes that, and while they disappeared, women continued to gather, to tend, to notice who wasn't arriving, and to show up anyway. In this article, she talks about her own personal experience. She would go on these good dates with men, and she'd be very hopeful that there would be a future because that seemed like the natural progression, and then they would just leave with no trace, no answer, no reason why. There was just enough spark to wonder what might unfold, enough curiosity to imagine a doorway, but he didn't step through it. Not with a plan, not with presence. He hovered, flirting, retreating, offering warmth, but no direction. It looks like interest, it feels like silence. What I won't entertain is directionless orbiting, that thing so many men now seem to mistake for connection, the perpetual maybe, the emoji check-ins, the casual seeing where it goes, without ever going anywhere. We call it a situationship, but mostly it's avoidance, an abdication of ownership, of feeling, of behavior, of sex that isn't a means to an end, but is communion. This idea that vulnerability is a threat instead of an invitation has created a culture of hesitation, of men circling intimacy but never entering it. And the result is thousands of tiny silos, everyone performing closeness but no one making a move that binds. Isolation, loneliness, a hunger for contact but nowhere to land. And I think this perfectly sums up this weird in-between area that we're at right now, where people are recognizing that modern dating doesn't serve us, but there's not really a blueprint or an exact model of where to go next. We know that a lot of us are retreating from hookup culture and are fed up with the dating apps, but we also don't really have any real options in person for dating unless we want to join a run club or join a pickleball club. And it's just like, there has to be other options. There's no way that this is all that there is. And I know that This is a struggle for me just because I'm a single person who wants love and I believe in love, but it feels like I'm the only one out there. Just about every single person I know has experience with being on dating apps at least once in their journey, because it seems like that's the natural progression in our generation. If you can't meet someone in person, download this app on your phone, set up a profile, and start clicking. Scrolling through endless options, possibly finding your match, but they may or may not be hidden behind Hinge jail. If you pay this small fee of $10.99 a month, then maybe you'll be able to see the most eligible bachelors in your area, and then maybe you'll find the love that you want. Always dangling love as this unattainable goal, commodifying not only yourself, but love itself. Commodifying the most priceless thing in the entire universe. There are countless studies that emphasize how people are getting fatigued from dating and actively retreating from this culture that no longer serves us. We've been promised this idea that if we just try harder, if we give it more of an effort, then we should surely be rewarded. But love is the one thing that the harder you try, the less results you're going to get, the less successful you're going to be. Because like Lucy says in Materialists, love is easy. Love isn't about math. Love isn't about pushing and being rigid. It is about flowing and listening to your internal compass. I see this more so with women because, hello patriarchy, but the idea that you have to be looking for a little bit of fun on the way to your partner. Like, don't let your boyfriend stop you from meeting, don't let your husband stop you from meeting your boyfriend. And I literally saw a TikTok last night that said, while you're looking for the right one, don't forget to have fun with the wrong ones. By a woman who has been indoctrinated in this culture of misogyny that teaches her that her value is only tied to male validation and tied to the partner that she has and the amount of fun she can have with men and how detached she can be from men, which is very much a Samantha Jones sex with no strings attached mindset, which goes hand in hand with the idea that we should just settle. If you're a single person and you can't really crack the code on finding your perfect partner, then just settle for whatever you're able to find. And this idea of settling is kind of presented in Sex and the City. The character Charlotte York is the hopeless romantic in the series, and she gets her perfect guy on paper, but she's deeply unsatisfied. This guy who is conventionally attractive and has the lifestyle and the salary to support the life that Charlotte wants, she gets that guy. And she's so excited because this is all she's been dreaming of, her Prince Charming. But after getting into this marriage, so many other flaws that aren't presented on paper are revealed, and it becomes a deal breaker for her. And she's heartbroken and gets divorced. The one thing she said she would never do. And then comes in her divorce lawyer, Harry. And Harry is not conventionally attractive, but he loves Charlotte for exactly who she is. And she learns that that is enough. In the show, when they're getting engaged, she tells him that she would be lucky to have him and that he is her chosen person. Love is more than a feeling. Love is about a choice. It is about the discipline of actively committing to learn the intricacies. Settling for Mr. Goodenough is advice that is always thwarted onto single women and encourages them to get into relationships out of convenience or obligation rather than an intuitive magnetism, an indescribable feeling of direction and ease. Mr. Perfect on paper will still come with flaws, and flaws that are maybe even more of a deal breaker than their salary or their height. I'm not saying I have the answers to never settling, but I do think it's important to understand why we settle, whether that's an internal choice or if it's a reflection of the programming that our culture has worked so strategically and intentionally to implement on us. And that leads me to the most important part of this entire episode, the art of loving. Love is the most beautiful, selfless, stupid, nonsensical thing anybody can do. It's messy, it's clumsy, it makes a fool out of all of us, but yet we choose to do it anyway. Love is the most nonsensical, illogical, messy, vulnerable, uncomfortable thing, but yet we do it anyways. But yet it is still the thing that keeps us going, keeps us breathing. It is the heartbeat to our lives. There is another Substack from Museguided that is just the most perfect thing in the entire world, and she articulates everything that I want to say, so I'm just going to read a bunch of it. and I'll give you my final thoughts. It is called Love Without Evidence. We live inside a forensic culture, one that demands justification for every emotional expenditure. Love, too, must now be itemized, tracked, optimized. We don't confess it. We present it like a business case. What are the KPIs? What returns can I expect? How does this investment perform over time, especially during periods of emotional volatility? Intimacy has become another speculative market. High risk, potentially high reward, often rigged. We spend hours decoding texts, tallying emotional labor, weighing each other's gestures against imagined standards of fairness. And in that economy, to love irrationally, to simply love, is to act like someone refusing to believe in gravity. Worse, it's to insist that maybe falling is the point. In our world that demands relationships operate like mutual benefit corporations, this kind of love is a disruptive force, unscalable, unsellable, and unstrategic. It loves, not because the beloved is impressive, but because the lover refuses to be emotionally bureaucratic. I loved them anyway, not because I couldn't help it, but because I chose not to stop, which is a different thing. It wasn't about chasing or winning or fixing. It was about honoring the fidelity of my feeling, even if the person on the receiving end didn't deserve it, or return it, or even understand it. We speak often about the trauma of being unloved, but what about the silent courage of loving anyway? Little sidebar, I want to insert, when I first read this, that made me feel so seen, because in all of my romantic pursuits, I'll say, I've always been unsuccessful, and I've always felt like the person that cared too much. I've always been the Amaya in that situation. I've always been told, not even just by potential romantic interest, but by friends even, that I love too much, that I care too much and too openly, and that me showing up in that way overwhelms people. And I think that it's really beautiful to reframe that and say that it is brave to openly admit that you care about someone and to show up in that way, and it is such a beautiful thing to love anyway, to love regardless of it being returned to you. Because love should be selfless. And that's not to say you should abandon yourself and not have boundaries or respect or know when to walk away, but it is to say that you can care, and it's okay if it doesn't go how you wanted it to go. You showing up and practicing the discipline of loving openly is a beautiful thing, and it will be rewarded and reciprocated in some way. I don't mean loving someone while letting them walk barefoot across your dignity. I mean refusing to link love to merit. It means understanding love not as currency, but as condition. Not something someone earns, but something you give because you want to live in a state of generosity rather than scarcity. In this version, love is not a virtue, it's a risk. One that threatens the entire economy of modern self-worth, which is largely built on the illusion that only the exceptional deserve to be chosen. What I am trying to articulate is the idea that perhaps the greatest dignity is to keep loving, even when it's unreturned, not because it's noble, but because it's yours. Because no one else gets to determine how open or closed your heart should be. Loving you was my decision, not your achievement. Means I refuse to let your behavior dictate my capacity to feel. It is an act of emotional autonomy, not emotional dependency. And if that confuses people, good. Let them stay confused. Love is not a business strategy. We have curated a culture of romantic cowardness with good lighting, but real vulnerability isn't an aesthetic. It's not a lifestyle brand. It's saying, I love you, knowing fully well you might be met with thanks. It's not a performative risk. It's an existential one. It's having the spine to choose love over dignity sometimes and knowing the difference. And that means sometimes you will be humiliated. Sometimes you will not be worth it. But that doesn't mean it wasn't real. Love without evidence is not a flaw. It's not a pathology. It is a choice. The only one I know how to make that makes me feel like I am not wasting this life. And maybe I will be called a fool. Maybe I am one. But at least I am not a coward. And for me, that is enough. Love is the one thing that cannot be calculated. Unlike dating, love isn't about strategy. It's not about playing your cards right. It is not about the perfect match. It is about two imperfect people coming together and recognizing those imperfections and seeing the beauty in them and saying, I'm going to love you anyway. I'm going to tend to the person that you are and the person you're becoming. Like Amaya said, it's about planting a seed and staying long enough to water it and see it grow. Yes, modern dating has failed us, and we are deeply, aggressively in need of a new culture to emerge, but that starts with acknowledging that while modern dating may have failed and not resonate with so many of us, romance lives on. I always say bring back male yearning, bring back yearning, and I think I keep saying that because deep down I know that it still exists. I'm just waiting for people to have the guts to come out and say that it matters. So please use this as an invitation to love with an open heart, love without restraint, and show people you care. That is the hottest, most valuable thing that anybody can do. I love you. It is cool to care, always. Bring it in, forward kiss time. Extra juicy this time. I'll see you very soon.